What's up, everybody? I'm Noah Karchivik, and welcome to another live stream from the Midwestern Marx Institute for Marxist Theory and Political Analysis. I'm really excited to be joined today by Mr. Dan Kovalik, who's a good friend of the Institute and recently personally experienced some of the escalating tensions coming from our own government against anyone that they consider dissident or going against the popular narrative, which is we want war with Russia, basically. It comes alongside a sort of overwhelming assault on our very freedoms, the freedom of speech in particular, in a sort of new McCarthyist era that I think can't be doing anything other than ramping up tensions for war. We're going to talk to Dan Kovalik here in a minute about this and a whole lot more. So stick around.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: "You look like a Russian, you look like a red. And if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the High Sheriff of Hazard."
Man, I love that song. I got to tell you. It's
Very
great.
nice.
Welcome to the show, Dan. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, lovely opening. Yeah, it was lovely. Thank you, Noah. Thanks for having me, too.
Of course, it's an honor to have you here. For anyone who's not aware of who Dan is, I don't know where you've been living, maybe under some sort of rock. He's been all over the world fighting for peace and humanity, basically, in a time where it seems that such a thing is rarer and rarer, sadly. Oh, man, before we even get started, Aaron Young, thank you for the $20 super sticker. Sorry to interrupt my little spiel here. Just so all you guys know, we are a completely people-funded institute. It's stuff like this that keeps the lights on. Seriously, like lights like this, that's what gets them. So thank you very much. All right. How are you doing today, Dan? It's good to see you.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Tired. I had a very grueling trip. I just got back from Venezuela. I was there for the International Anti-Fascist Congress, which was really awesome and very uplifting. Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, addressed us at the end, really for a couple hours. He had a whole program of music. He even sang a little bit, believe it or not. And it was wonderful. and it was tiring though. They flew us through Bolivia, and it took 48 hours to get to Venezuela, 48 hours to get home. So I am running on empty a little bit, but got a little rest today, so I'm good.
That's rough. Well, good. Rest is important. Once Maduro gets going, he really cooks. I'll tell you what. People sort of, there's this really social chauvinist narrative, that the thinking all happens in the Western countries or the Northern one in this this situation, and then all the people in South America or what we call the third world, they just do the activism, right? The movements. But it really couldn't be further from the case. Anytime you hear Maduro speak, he's so eloquent and so brilliant, and he really has a very good grasp of how society functions on a really foundational level. And I find that impressive. I was actually I was going to list a couple credentials, but you weren't only just in Venezuela recently. You were recently in Russia too.
Yes.
That was what, 2 months ago, I think?
I was in Russia in June, I think. I've been to Russia 5 times in the last 2 years. And been to the Donbass 3 times, and been to Crimea once, and been to Kherson region once, all in the last 2 years.
I was really bummed out I couldn't make it to the last trip to the Donbass when Chris invited me. I was excited, but I watched the report you guys gave at the UN, and it was really powerful too. And I have to think that what's happening now has to be connected in some way to that. So for all the people we mentioned who might be, living under rocks or wherever, maybe there's some, libertarian living on their own in a cabin in the woods somewhere. Why don't you let everyone know what happened when you got back in the country from Venezuela?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll open it with a nice story. When we were in the Venezuelan airport getting ready to go, first of all, they chartered a flight for all the delegates who were brought to Bolivia. So there were about 200 of us, international people from all over. Actually, I guess the people on our plane were all based mostly from the Western Hemisphere. I think all from the Western Hemisphere. And but in addition, there were, I don't know how many, maybe 30 firefighters who were in the airport. And I was wondering, okay, that's cool. Maybe they're getting ready to do some sort of training or something. But we boarded the plane. And then the firefighters got on with us. And then I realized what was happening. When we flew into Venezuela from Bolivia, I had to spend about 24 hours in Bolivia in Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz was, there was very little visibility because of smoke from the forest fires. There's major forest fires burning in Bolivia. I don't know if people know that, but millions of acres of land have been burned. Well, these firefighters for Venezuela were going with us on the flight to Bolivia to help them fight the forest fires, which I thought was a beautiful thing, and
Absolutely,
a real example of international solidarity that Venezuela shows to a lot of countries, even though they're suffering a lot. During Maduro's speech, he a couple things he mentioned that, and some I knew, but just to be reminded of it. When Trump initiated the intensification of sanctions against Venezuela, I want to say in 2019, I could be wrong about that, but he said that their revenue, listen to this, their national revenue was reduced. I want to make sure I get this right. From $50 billion a year to $700 million.
Jesus.
It wiped out their economy. Can you imagine that? It cost $700 million here in Pittsburgh just to build an extension of the T train from downtown across the river to the stadiums. I mean, it's nothing. So
it
they, you know, and they're fighting back from that. Things seem a lot better in Caracas, a lot more traffic and activity than when I was there last. Things are calm after the, you know, attempted coups, they call
Yep.
it, after the recent elections.
Well, they have the fastest growing economy now in the entire entirety of South America, don't they?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
what it really made me think of though is our Pentagon literally lost over $1 trillion. And comparing that to how much they lost in that's insane to me. Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. And by the way, the other thing that they mentioned in the conference in the context of fascism was the, you know, the fascistic nature of the right-wing opposition in Venezuela. The right-wing opposition killed 27 Chavistas after the elections. And at the event, they had some of the families of the people killed, which was very moving. So, so in any case, I got back, flew back from Bolivia to the Miami-Dade County Airport, and I was, you know, showed my passport to the agent, and she asked me a few questions and then said, please step over there, which I know what that means. Basically, since I started going to Russia about 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, I'm getting questioned pretty much, pulled over for interrogation pretty much every time I come back into the country. In fact, I was told in Chicago when I was pulled aside. Actually, in that case, they actually waited for me off the plane and escorted me to my interrogation. The guys told me that I have a case number with the State Department, actually, that is resulting in these interrogations. So I knew I was going to be interrogated as usual, but it wasn't as usual. In truth, it was different. My prior interrogations have lasted 15 to 20 minutes. They've been pretty friendly, have been just questioning, no bag searches, no seizing of electronics. This one was different. I was brought to a room, as sometimes happens, where, you know, everyone is sitting who are waiting to be processed. But people, you know, were coming and going, getting processed pretty quick, and I still sat there for quite a while. Actually, next to a Russian guy who started talking to me, who was pulled aside himself. He said he was a nuclear physicist. And by the way, I was a little reticent to talk to him because I wondered if he was there, because he sat right next to me, whether he was there to try to get information.
Right, like that sounds a little set up-ish. Like, oh, sir, I am nuclear physicist from Russia.
Yeah, if I'm right, can we talk a little about the homeland? So I was a little cautious about that, but finally, after some time, I don't know how long, it was quite a while, probably at least an hour sitting there. And again, that never has happened to me.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Usually they actually make an effort to get me in and out, or up till now. And then, so I was brought back by an agent, and she said, oh, you're part of a random drug search, because a lot of people are bringing in drugs from Bolivia. So we're going to check all your bags, and then we're going to ask you some questions and get you out of here. But it didn't go that way. So she checked my bags and also had me empty my pockets, including my cell phone. And she pulled my computer and cell phone aside and said, oh, and by the way, as part of the search, we can also search your electronics. Which,
right, in case you were hiding cocaine inside your phone.
Well, how she put it was, here's what she said: in case, you know, in case you sent a message saying you swallowed some drugs or something, you know, that was the pretext. And but we're not going to. She said specifically, we're not going to look at all your stuff. We're not even going to turn on the internet. We're going, you know, it's going to be a very calculated look at your stuff. And I was like, okay, you know, and she took me then to a back room where I had to fill out a form, which was fairly straightforward, kind of name, rank, and serial number type of thing. And then she went away with my electronics and came back and then started grilling me, not about drugs, but about my travels, who I've met with, what countries I like and don't like. Do I meet with government officials? Do I know any government officials? what countries do I feel best? Where am I treated the best? Where am I treated the worst? And on the first round of that, I was very, my tack is always to be as friendly and nice as possible. And usually I get treated nicely in return. She then left, came back after a time, started questioning me again along the same lines. And then I knew then for sure that this was a ruse, the whole random drug. This was not a random drug search, which I thought was pretty, again, what would be the odds of a guy who gets pulled over most of the time anyway for political reasons, happens to win the lottery of getting randomly drug checked. And she never asked me about drugs, by the way. So at some point, I actually then was like, I did become less cooperative. It was then she asked me this question, well, where do you fear most, like, country going to? What country do you find most threatening? I said, honestly, the one I'm in now. Honestly, because of situations like this, where I'm treated like a criminal. And that was about the end of that conversation. She then brought me, I said I had to go to the bathroom. So I was brought back in the main room with everyone, went to the bathroom. Again, sat for quite a while, was brought back. She said, got some good news, bad news. Good news is we're going to let you go. We're going to give you your computer back. So I assume that had been copied, Bad news is we're going to keep your phone because we haven't had time to look through it. But here's a receipt for it. You should get it back by noon, which I have not gotten it back yet. But I did get a receipt. And then I was on my way, and of course, obviously the most, and I was there for a total of at least 4 hours. And, the thing with the phone is obviously quite upsetting. Like most people, my whole life is on that phone. I'm sitting around here today, like, what do I do myself, and
yeah. Well, not to mention how expensive phones are.
What's that?
And not to mention how expensive phones are.
Yeah.
Like I have an old iPhone and it costs me a good bit of money.
Now, she said, I'll get it back. I got a receipt. She said it will be mailed back to me. I assume that'll happen. But again, nothing she told me was true. I mean, it was all lies. I mean, the whole thing about the drug thing. I mean, clearly they were ready for me and wanted my stuff. And we know about Danny Shaw. His phone was taken as well. So, and they're clearly going to copy the whole thing and clearly going to do an investigation. And this all, we know, and again, they were most interested, not as much even about my trip to Venezuela, but about my trips to Russia. And by the way, my passport, I mean, has like 5 Russian visas in it. I mean, it's not a pretty sight in terms of this type of thing. But can I say something about that for a second? I just want to address something because, I see in some comments and, people often refer to people like me, maybe you, as like a Russian, I don't know what, a Russian mouthpiece or a Russian.
We get called Putin propagandists.
Putin propagandists. Yeah. Let me address that issue.
By all means, brother, the floor is yours.
Yeah. I mean, I really resent that characterization. I mean, I understand why the government would make it. So, I mean, I get that, but that's for propaganda purposes themselves. But why kind of others would buy into that is silly. I've never met Vladimir Putin. First of all, let me tell you that. The last time I was in Russia, I was held in Russian customs for 5 hours. I've been held in Russian customs for 5 hours before that when I came in. I don't get a red carpet treatment when I go to Russia because they don't know the heck I am. Okay, not because they dislike me. They don't know who I am. Okay, I'm not famous there. By the way, she asked me, "Oh, are you famous?" No. The government, yeah, I do get a visa. Is from the consulate. You have to do that to go. But other than that, I've never met. Not only have I never met with Putin, I've never met with Lavrov or any officials of any consequence. While I agree with the Russian government on many things, I disagree with them on many things. When I'm on RT, for example, which is the target of the day for the Justice Department, I'm never told what to say. I say what I want to say. If they ask me if they want to interview me about something that I have either no knowledge of, or I don't feel I can be helpful, or I don't feel like, it's just something I care about or something that I feel will embarrass me to talk about, I just don't do the interview. I do an interview I want. I say what I want. And that's how it goes. No one at RT has ever told me what to say. Now, look, again, I'm not naive. At some point, if I start saying things they don't like, they won't invite me back. I get it. But the point is, I'm not their tool. And again, so this idea I'm somehow Russian propagandist is ridiculous. But you understand what they say Russian propagandists. They'll often say, well, that's a Putin line. Putin says there's Nazis in the Ukraine. Well, that's a Putin line. Well, the fact he says it doesn't mean it's not true. If Putin says the sky is blue, it doesn't mean the sky ain't blue. If he says the world is round, doesn't mean the world ain't round. Right? That's a silly, silly statement. The truth is there are Nazis in Ukraine. The mainstream press reported on those Nazis for years. The U.S. Congress passed a law years ago saying it was illegal to fund the Nazis in Ukraine. So I guess they wouldn't have bothered to do that if there weren't Nazis there. By the way, they then later repealed that law so they could fund the Nazis. Okay, so that's just one example of all this. So that's a very important thing to say. But this is classic. This is classic. It's just like the communists first of all, like in the 1950s with McCarthyism. First of all, a lot of the people they persecuted weren't communists, though they claimed they were communists. And those who were communists that they persecuted were not Soviet agents, even though that's what they claimed they were. So, right, this is a classic trope.
It's the remembering the horrors of McCarthyism and what they did to people's lives, innocent people's lives, that really makes this so scary for me. Because I mean, everything you're saying about RT is the same for each of us. RT's never given me a single prompt. They've just said, do you want to talk about this? Come talk about it. Yeah. They've never paid out any of us, none of that. But it's the same. They treat us and anyone working with international news or news that isn't within their approved, monopoly structure, the way they treated communists in that era. And it's beginning in the same way. It's beginning in intimidation and harassment campaigns. Look at Danny. He's lost his job because of this. Another girl who used to write for the Institute got hounded by those Ukrainian Nazis they say aren't in Ukraine anymore until she had to leave her job. And it got to a point during the original McCarthyist period where the indictments for the leadership of the Communist Party came down. And Gus Hall got advance notice of this. And so he was planning to flee to the Soviet Union to apply for political asylum, made it into Mexico, and the FBI illegally entered Mexico, kidnapped him, brought him back to the U.S. in order to arrest him. They arrested Henry Winston around the same time and mistreated him so poorly while he was in prison that he went blind from lack of medical treatment. And the way they're ramping up tensions now seems even more immediate and acute than back then. Back then, the Soviet Union had no interest whatsoever in standing up to the U.S., right? This is the era when Khrushchev was busy with de-Stalinization. So I don't see Putin in Russia carrying that same geopolitical position that Khrushchev was in. He's in a far stronger political position to say no to whatever our government says, meaning the repression here could get even worse. And that's terrifying to me. So when I heard about what Chris told me, what happened to you, I was freaked out, honestly.
Well, yeah, and I'll be honest, first of all, I'm trying to keep a stiff upper lip. and I'm trying to steady the course. But sure, I'm afraid. I mean, I don't want my life ruined. People think like you do this work and maybe they even have a death wish or something, because you do know these sorts of things might happen to you, first of all. But you don't want it to happen to you, but you do it despite the fact it could happen to you. Right? I don't want it to happen. I like my life. I like to be able to travel the way I do. I'm afraid that now that may be in jeopardy. Again, I'm going to try not to let it affect my travels, but I mean, at some point it may become impossible for me to do that. They could try to ruin me financially, whatever. I mean, of course, I'm a human being. I have kids. They're adults now. They're in their 20s. They don't need me as much as they used to, but still, I mean, I'd like to think they need me for something. So, obviously one fears for the worst. And I've been thinking about that, fearing for the worst, the last day since this happened. My whole life is in their hands. They're going to copy my whole phone, everything I have in the world. I've had that phone for years. I mean, they're going to know my whole life, and they keep it. By the way, they have. I read it. I mean, you can Google this. There's mainstream newspaper articles about this. They are collecting about 10,000 phones a year. They copy all the information on it, keep it. And by the way, this is the thing that shocked me. All 2,700 customs officers in America have access to that information. They can just go on their lunch time while they're eating a piece of pizza and look at your life story.
That's insane to me.
It's absolute madness. It's absolute madness. And why this is allowed to happen, I guess most people do know that when you go in, if you come into the country, if you're in an airport, until you go through customs and immigration, and you push those double doors open into the main terminal, you're not in the United States. Okay? I don't know if people understand that. You do not have constitutional rights in that area. You are at the border. And they have the power of God over you. They can keep you for 72 hours. I think they can keep you more if they had cause. You don't have right to a lawyer. They can take all of your electronics and others' property. I mean, it's really incredible. And that's the other reason, you feel very compelled to cooperate, because I may not get out of here.
And that's what worries me, is because, you at least have one up on, say, me, right? You are a lawyer, and me, I would have no idea what I'm doing. Like, are these people breaking the law and getting away with it because I don't know it? That kind of thing would be going through my mind, but you can't do anything about it. Most people, and I'm sure they count on most people having no idea what the laws are.
But again, it doesn't matter. They really can pretty much do anything. I mean, I think they can't, sodomize you or something, but, short of that, they have the power of God over you. I mean, when the first room they took me to, where they looked at my bags, there was a mattress underneath the table, which presumably is for people who they keep overnight, on this little tiny mattress, So, it's a scary place when you're in there. That, you can't say boo. And everyone's armed, of course. And so, yeah, it's very traumatic. Again, I don't want to overblow it. And it's not about me. Let me just say, it's not about me personally. People should be concerned because it could happen to them, and because this is an attack on free speech, and because, as we were talking about before the show, it's about something else that's even more scary, and that is we are headed towards World War III.
Yeah, let's actually pivot towards this sort of bigger question of war and why this is happening now.
Yeah, well, so like in the last week, if you've been following the news, the U.S. and UK are preparing to send long-range missiles to Ukraine to be used against Russia deep within Russian territory. And Vladimir Putin said, if that is done and you fire those into Russian territory, we will not respond by attacking Ukraine. We will attack Western power sources. I mean, Western centers of decision making. And by the way, people say, "Oh, that's a terrible thing for Putin to say." That's exactly what John Kennedy said. That's exactly what John Kennedy said during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He said, if any missile is launched, by the way, by Cuba against any country in the hemisphere, we will treat that as a direct attack by the Soviet Union against the United States, and we will respond against the Soviet Union. Okay, this is exactly what Putin is saying. It's the reverse Cuban Missile Crisis, which many of us have been saying for years. And unlike back then, when Khrushchev and Kennedy were talking to each other and were able to negotiate a solution in 13 days, Biden hasn't talked to Putin in years.
If he even can speak to a person at this point.
Yeah. Even when he could, he didn't do it. But yeah, he certainly can't now. And I'll just say, and I'm not, by the way, I'll just say for the record, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein in November. I won't vote for Trump. I won't vote for Kamala. But I will say one thing about Trump. I watched that debate, and I will say people should be surprised and shocked that he was the voice of reason on this. He raised the issue that we're hurtling towards World War III and that he doesn't want it. That's like a radical statement now.
I want everyone to sit back and think about that for a minute. The Republican Party candidate, Donald Trump, is the one politician in this country right now saying, hey, World War III might be a bad idea.
Yeah. Let's
not do that. And everybody, when we talk about who people are going to vote for, and you know what, I'm not even going to vote. I don't vote. In fact, I think I think if all of us rallied to not vote, that would be one of the biggest blows against the system we could collectively make in November. But that's neither here nor there. When liberals talk about, Kamala Harris is at least the lesser evil, right? The idea that there's one candidate that may, in some small way, try to avoid World War III automatically makes them the lesser evil.
I agree. And and again, the fact that Kamala Harris is part of this genocide in Gaza, and she, in fact, lied at the debate about these mass rapes that happened on October 7th, a key war propaganda trope that justifies this genocide, and it's a lie. The fact that she's part of that she's complicit in this brutal, nasty genocide in Gaza that everyone should be sickened by disqualifies her, in my view, to be president. I mean, disqualifies her to get my vote. She and Biden should be in The Hague in jail.
100%. And anyone who is telling you that this person who is not only just okay with genocide, but actively aiding the most anti-human thing possible to do, and calls himself a communist, should be ashamed of themselves for the rest of their life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a cruel joke. It shows how warped, I'm sorry, most of the American mind is, especially the liberal mind. I'm sorry. The liberal mind has been utterly hijacked by Trump derangement syndrome, by Russiagate, by COVID. I mean, they just have lost their freaking minds. I'm sorry. It's just a fact.
And you know what's funny? Lenin and Stalin both wrote about this happening within the Second International. Right? Stalin says if you look at this really small section in Foundations of Leninism on method, he straight up points out why the Second International became social chauvinist and more concerned with their own petty local affairs than the safety of all humanity as the world's plunging towards war is because they became middle class, right? They lost sight of a daily necessity and struggle. They weren't within it anymore. All of their, Marxism turned into sloganeering and hollow dogmas. And this is precisely what happened to the liberals and middle-class leftists of the last period of history. Now, thank God there's a new movement emerging, but these people are still around and still telling us every single day, well, Kamala Harris is going to do something, blah, 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 Roe versus Wade. And I'm like, look, you don't understand. Nuclear annihilation trumps everything. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's not that, that abortion is not an important issue. It's that nuclear Armageddon trumps everything.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Call me a one-issue guy. I don't like genocide. I don't like nuclear war. I guess that's two issues. But, and by the way, she ain't going to do that either. The Democrats have been promising for 50 years to do what she said she's going to do. They ain't doing it because you know why? They want to run on this issue every election cycle.
Because the only thing they have is Republicans will do this.
Yeah. All they have is abortion. I mean, I'm sorry. That's all you got. Okay. And as you say, it's not unimportant, but there are other issues. And again, she's lying. She ain't going to do anything for you. And I don't know, again, there's this fog, this mental fog people have. They don't see reality for what it is. They don't see what's happening. In the day when I was growing up, I'm old enough to remember the first Cold War when all of us, even me as a child, was very painfully aware of the dangers of nuclear war.
Yeah, same here.
And all of a sudden, no one cares anymore. We're closer to nuclear war than we've ever been. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists says this. Objectively, it's just true, and no one cares. How is it? And do you remember? This is a couple of years ago, even. I mean, they've been trying to lay the groundwork for this. There was a New York City public service announcement. Did you see this about what you do if the U.S. is under nuclear attack? And it told you, go down to the subways to seek shelter. And at the end, the woman who's doing the PSA says, New Yorkers, you got this one. No one's got this. No one's got this. We're going to be dead, okay? And the world will be uninhabitable. There'll be a nuclear winter, okay? We know this from scientists who say this. But no one cares. I feel like some insane hermit in the woods yelling and no one listens and no one cares. And people like us are being persecuted. We're the ones trying to save the world. I mean, I'm sorry. We are doing our little bit to try to stop this. We don't want war with Russia. We don't think Russia's our enemy. We've been saying this for years. I wrote a book about it in 2017, the plot to scapegoat Russia. I mean, this has been my calling. It is my calling. And I'm not going to stop doing it, but you pay a price for it because the war, the hounds of war are restless. They want this. And the fact that this is coming right now from the Democratic White House and State Department, that they are the ones rattling the sabers, pushing for nuclear war, should be shocking, absolutely shocking to liberals and Democrats, but they don't care.
They couldn't care less. And I wonder how much of it has to do with how controlled our media sphere is. If you look at the last statistic I saw was only 11% of Americans trust an entity they call the mainstream media. Now, that's in the abstract. However, when it comes time to actually put that distrust into action, in disbelieving what they're telling us, people just fail in some way.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of it is because the next layer down is just as controlled as, CNN and Fox News and all those. The what we get from social media, websites calling themselves independent that aren't, things like Democracy Now, things like the Daily Wire. And all of it is just pushing war and Nazis are okay and war and Nazis are okay. This is where we're at, where people believe they are dissident. And this is all over Twitter right now by blaming Jewish people for everything like it's 1928 all over again.
Right.
It's insane to me that we've gotten into this place where logic goes out the door and people just brainlessly believe these sort of narratives that are pre-constructed by, institutions they've never even heard of that control the media they think is independent. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy.
And that's why they hate RT so much. RT was playing a role of being an independent media source. I mean, they were, and why? Because they were filling a vacuum. Because as you say, there is very little independent media anymore. Like, I guess The Nation still exists. I don't know who reads it. I mean, Mother Jones still exists. It seems very right wing now. I mean, there's not much independent periodicals. There's no independent news outside Democracy Now!, which again has been very pro-imperialist. We're supported the war in Libya, supported the war in Syria. They're good on Palestine. That's great, but again, they're pretty weak on other things. There's nothing, and RT filled a gap. And so you had very talented people, smart people like Chris Hedges, for example, who was part of that. You had some of the best and brightest leftists who were associated with it, or at least went on the show because it was the only game in town. And it's still in many ways the only game in town, not because it's Russian, but because they take a different view of the world. And also because they want peace. I mean, it is ironic. You will never hear the American president talk about peace. They don't want peace. Kamala Harris, did she ever use the word peace? She doesn't want peace. It's just insane. So that's where we're at. And so they will use the RT thing, going after RT, as a pretext to go after people like you and me, to try to also, by the way, influence the election by claiming Russia's interfering when they're not. Because, by the way, it's very hard to even watch RT in the United States. It's not on TV anymore. It's not on YouTube anymore. They kicked it off. You can, I believe, on Twitter, aka X, you can watch some clips on there still.
Yeah, they don't have full episodes on Twitter.
Not full episodes.
I think the only place you can get it is Rumble, and you have to pay, right?
Right. And by the way, aren't they going after the head of Rumble? Isn't the Justice Department indicting the head of Rumble? So, it's incredible what's happening. It's incredible. So that's where we're at. And it's a scary time to be alive. But again, we have to just keep fighting because, again, the stakes are too high. I mean, we're literally fighting for human survival now. Yeah.
No, what it makes me think of, back in the day when I was a kid, when the first Cold War was sort of at its end, I remember my dad and his buddies talking about freedom of speech. It was a left-wing issue at the time. And this has somehow stopped, where rightists will talk about freedom of speech, and it's like the left just said, okay, you guys can have that one now.
Yeah, no, because we don't want to hear the other side. We don't want to hear people who defend Russia. We don't want to hear people who are against lockdowns. We don't want to, it's like those people at the DNC. Do you remember at the DNC when people were reading off the names of the dead in Palestine and the people in the DNC walked by with their fingers in their ears? That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing about everything.
Absolutely disgusting. And I mean, I hate to be dramatic about it, but remember who the people were that were burning books and not allowing the other side to be heard, right? It was the Nazis.
Right.
I don't know. Real quick before we move on, we had one super chat from Dustin Schlesinger, who asks, has the ACP made a statement on the Uhuru case? I wanted to bring this up because this is a perfect example what they did to Omali Yeshitela and the other two leaders of the Uhuru movement. So no, I don't think the ACP's made an official statement, but as one of the leaders of the ACP, any Americans who are railroaded and put through show trials like this, it's absolutely disgusting that our government's doing this. Have you been following that case though, Dan? Do you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, and I think that was a test case for the government because they went after a group that no one's heard of before, that they thought no one would support, and they wanted to get them for allegedly being foreign agents of Russia because they got like $500 from some Russian for some local political campaign. That was the allegation. $500. I mean, AIPAC's spending over $100 million on this election. By the way, that's the elephant in the living room, right? That's the foreign influence.
And they're bragging about primarying the people standing for election here.
They claim they won every primary they funded.
Unreal.
It's unreal. So, I mean, it's just we live in upside down world is the truth of it. And people need to see that. And they need, I'm sorry, in all modesty, they need people like us who are willing to say what the reality is and to fight for what we believe in and to take risks to do that. That's how it goes. And that's what keeps me going in my moments of despair. And believe me, I have them,
Yeah, I think we all do. For me, I think about, my son, it seems your kids are a couple years older than mine. Mine's 14, right? And by the way, he's right now celebrating his 1-year anniversary with his girlfriend. He's very happy about that.
Oh, that's cute. Congratulations.
14? How is he with a girl for a year? That's crazy to me, but hey, more power to him. But thank you. But I think about him, right? I don't want him to have to go through the same thing that we're going through now. And it terrifies me that he will become a man in a world where he won't be able to say what he thinks.
Right.
He won't be able to fight for peace, and maybe a world where he gets, drafted into the army to go murder Russians who have more in common with him than the people who sent him there.
Of course. Well, and of course you saw, I mean, if people are following the news, that the U.S. is going to just start automatically registering young people from the age of 18 to 25 for the draft. It used to be you had to do it, but you actually would have to go through the motions of doing it yourself. You were required to do it, but you had to do it. But now they're going to do it for you. You're just going to be automatically signed up because they're getting ready for a war. I mean, war is coming. Winter is coming for all of you Game of Thrones fans. And, it's a terrible thing, and it is the main issue of the day. And again, the fact that it's not being treated as that is just amazing.
I think that we seem to be at this time, and I think about this a lot because it's on, it's involved with the theoretical project that I've been working on for years now on the death of the middle classes. But we seem to be at this point now when everyday Americans are waking up to at least seeing that there's some problem. And we're all like products of what built us. People don't really have the tools at hand to understand what the problem is or why these things are happening, but at least are saying, hey, there's something going on here and it's messed up. And I feel like now, to end on a sort of maybe more optimistic note, it will be easier to rebuild an anti-war movement because people are sort of in this position where it's already affecting our living standards.
Right.
I mean, the cost of living is through the roof and wages just can't keep up. And I think that is a recipe for people getting on board. I don't know. It feels to me like we're winding down here. So I want to make sure though, before we go though, do you have anything else you want to talk about or get to before we call it a night?
No, I've pretty much covered it, and I, by the way, I appreciate this. It's very helpful for me therapeutically to talk about this, and I appreciate the camaraderie that you've shown me. And that's another thing about being in a movement, in a socialist movement, a communist movement, is you have comrades, and that helps. Do you mind? Can I just plug my book? Can I?
Of course. Of course. Give us 1 second, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
LT, thank you so much for the 5, brother. He says, for your immense work, Dan and Noah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. That's very kind. Thank you.
We call him the best trot. He very much is the best trot.
There are some good trots. Thank you very much. So,
plug away, brother.
If you want to cheer me up tonight, buy my book, The Case for Palestine, Why It Matters, Why You Should Care. And I appreciate everyone tuning in on a Saturday night. Most people are out drinking and having a great time. You're here watching Midwestern Marks. So I appreciate it. And I love you guys at Midwestern Marks. I admire you. I'm glad to be part of the team. I consider myself part of the team. So I
100%. And the feeling is absolutely mutual, brother. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us about this tonight. It's an important issue. And frankly, we should have an update on these things at least once a week.
Yeah.
So anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome. Just hit me up. Maybe when you get a phone back, you can text me. But until then, we'll figure out a way. All right, everybody.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to call it a night, and we will see you all next time. Dan, stick around after, and we'll talk shit and make sure all that stuff.
Thank you.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in a song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place.